Chetawa Cheba Maleba Randon Somede Tabro Son Dega Chacho Niete Deran Sedemba Toba Dejebimendo Tabaye Chesamalogi Deboy
Male Semje Kunegi Kungur Chende de Ponje Mese Jomzela Mena Male Jishin Kengur Peyum Chen Korjine Dirshe Susu Zashela Nara Rajivur Chehoshi Chula Chusha Daburdim Bamshi Damye Yereme Chidu Gyurhoshi Tamji Shindu Dugigyu Yumjine Dirne Jeneba Leda Jasenam Kalabardin Dagi Cheye Shele Dudingi Dune Shususu Ton Sumai Gwendanyamba Yebe Mandan Gege Sarje Deshiya Barabula Nai Senge Bende Dendu Chedevarne Shusu Chedevarne Shusu Sarva Data Gada Bima Kamalaye Sadam Sovai Chitarai Tampai Samgi Yelonan Gine Trisuedar Lai Chune Daba Samaya Shiri Ragi Dole Truba Yeshu Zimbiramesu Namakara Kavarajene Kyayam Chekuraje Nam Laju Trejayen Chandobe Dai Me Dai Mar Me Dejodan Sharasirul Mecheba Nayum Chekurdan Jelaibu Ton Sumoy Raib Jamji den nai de nai bo ji te nai mor mi ji ne yun ji kor da ji lai bu so dai 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 ji da Roy de shire jadin bai de be de namba mayun che kor da je lai bu gyal ser ne che na de Yain I'm kai kai varale drudi sena
Hola, so da nian xian de nine da.
We are beginning with the opening prayers.
Vindrashire gyobani sene Tensali she domdre soande Dedan dengi duma tamji Bayon singe shile jonsen Tome meba kombe pijon Tebe pare sendre soande Sende chanjuro yinbe bebe se samembra niradote Chelo seba cheve namdaraji Kume jemba dendere soande Chambe Tome gyoda jela da gyoshi Meda ngebra sindri soa Nyamonyelo gezi medon shi Kati shaya nipu chelenchi Keve nganzu sambo medon ye so suru je be shiragi Jiro jesu jubra mi je ba nge de tambra je de so Chembro chala je shi je je lo me lo da ba nam je san jira ne ge la jo ve lo je ge ve de nyo so ngo ra je de so te dra yen de je le ge gang do yen de je ve chashi je ve lu se de ba ga ma ba ye gong ba zong ji xiu 我三界觉当所业上那么老成就帮助大内耶稣大业君业一别是那么业主拉本三业主不了修三业觉当所业上那么成就帮助大内耶稣 大业君业一别是那业主拉本三业主不了修三业觉当所业修那么成就报道大内耶稣大业君业一别是那么业主拉本三业主不了修常在往当去见下巴解说也让归心社会给我众生大给解撒把堂接当成就节目所写笔记就写面多人热为灵心念的眼巴 三界心对没得不爱，如果能到心来绝不来说，世间能也三八，落叶接着知道，其中的梦的把一切给公路公路说。 好了，说的啊，这交警不搞处置不起，那看着不行，那不是五十七倍的，那么这边过。
I would like to offer my greetings to Kyabje Bokar Rinpoche and Kempo Rinpoche, all of the Kempos and Geshes and teachers, all of the monks in the Shedras, and also in particular all of the nuns from the Nun Shedras, as well as all of the monastic and lay male and female students watching all around the world on this webcast. So now I'll begin with my prayers.
Dishi lomra jeba khanso da de me je ge me ge nyamba de 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 ja fa ye ge la lo de ne ge bon da me ge na dan ro gu ni da ge ba tham je ge do da ge che de sonyin ya zo ge be zo da me ngo zo ge go sen be be mra se ge ro ku gum je ju ju ba la ni sen bong ge chu ba shen du se ba so na la ge wa ge do je se ge zo she ge be mo ji che ren kam sa me de da me zo re mi le lo ro chma de se ku je de ba de 용진 라마 교버지 알란데 시제 칼라게르 영으로 연습을 좀 되잖아. 그래도 뭐 뿐이서 그 유를 뭐지라 장자로 반대도 지상을 군조 라마 가마 봐 영으로 군이 전에 시제배 이담네 좀 맞출래 군지 적으로 시점 배제 점래 벤저지 그벤 되던 잠에도 지 경어랑 시제 전에 남자도 뭐 손으로 건드려 링바다 주저라는 거 米有多些小了肠子了，把你咋了嘛？人不是那个就外面点酒了，个人情别管那些什么，不送多烟我都咋都说，那说，哦呀，嗯。哦呀，他这一点，当然，가장 엄마지가 줄여다 가장 엄마 쌤다 가장 다 가장다 가니면 이니가 정리한다下一个 뭐 쉬우러 봐.
Over the past couple of days, I spoke quite a bit about the topic of vegetarianism. And yesterday, I didn't really look at the time. And I think actually the second session we had yesterday was probably the longest session we had in the whole month. I wasn't looking at the clock. And as I was teaching, I was starting to get a little tired. I was wondering what's going on. And later, when I looked at the clock, the time I'd spoken was probably was longer, and I think my body was giving me a sign that it was time to stop. Time was time. So there's a little bit left to speak about me, but I didn't have time to go through it all today, so I will. I thought I should speak about today what was left over to speak out from yesterday. But first, I thought first I should speak a little bit about what is said in the autobiographical versus good deeds. Now, regarding the autobiographical versus good deeds, I have to control everything, and that's not so easy. So this is it. Within the autobiographical versus good deeds, there are the two main sections. The second section of this is how he practiced the paths of the three types of individuals. That also has three parts. How he practiced the paths of the lesser, middling, and greater individuals. And so among these three subtopics, we're on the last one. The last topic is how he practiced the path of the greater individual. And this also has three parts: the intention arousing bodhicitta, the action of meditating on the two types of bodhicitta, and how he trained in the precepts of the two types of bodhicitta. So of these three, so today, The other day, actually, I talked about the ninth good deed, how the intention arousing bodhicitta. So in terms of the individual good deeds, this is the ninth of the good deeds, and I spoke about it the other day, but I did not give a very long explanation the other day, so I thought I'd give a little bit more in depth today. So I'd like to remind you of the root verse. This is it. All beings without distinction are the same as my parents. It is illogical to group them into factions of friend and foe. With uncontrived love for beings in intolerable states, I thought, when can I bring them to the benefit of true enlightenment? I think of this as one of my good deeds. So to explain this, I've already explained what Mikyo Dorje said about it in his instructions on training in his liberation story. So related to that, to give a few more, say a little bit more, generally we have ourselves and others and friends. We have ourselves, we have others, and then the friends with whom we are connected. So for all of us, we all say that we're Buddhist practitioners. We all say we're Buddhist. And in particular, say we're Mahayana practitioners or secret Mantravada practitioners. And so that's what we assert, and that's what how we identify ourselves. But we give ourselves that name. And we wear the clothes, but when it comes to the actual practice, we actually do the Mahayana practice as someone who is a Mahayana practitioner should? That's not really, if we look at this, it's really not certain we do. In particular, many of us, when our side or our friends that has a loss, for example, one of our friends or the people we like experience a loss, if we don't get something, if something bad or something inauspicious happens to us, we worry that something this happened and feel miserable about it. And then the other side of that is the people that are against us, or when things work for them, when things get better for them. And when we hear about that, it's like in our minds, we cannot bear it. And that's how we feel usually. We think to ourselves, it shouldn't be that things are going well for them, but it did. And so then we feel uncomfortable and unhappy about that. So forget about having love and affection for all sentient beings, ourselves and others. We think about the people we don't like, our enemies, and we do whatever we can to harm them. And forget about anything else. Even if we have to say something good about them, we can't even bring ourselves to say something good about them. So it's like there's probably no way we can actually have love and compassion for all sentient beings. And in addition to that, we use all the power, whatever power we have, to harm the people we don't like, and to spread bad news and say bad things about them. And then we use up our entire lives acting in this way. And if for someone who has so much such actions and intentions, if we say, is that really someone we can call a Mahayana practitioner? It's not, really not. So is this, if someone who acts like that, can we call them a Dharma practitioner? We can't really, we have to look at it ourselves with that. If we say that it's not okay, if we say that that's not okay, if someone were to say that to us, we wouldn't say that. It doesn't help us in terms of taming our own minds. And so in order to bring a bit of benefit to ourselves, we have to turn our attention inwards and look at is our way of thinking good. We need to change our way of thinking, edit our thoughts. So we need to examine ourselves. And so before we do any Dharma practice, we need to look at our intentions. And this is why it's always said we do that. We act as if we were Dharma practitioners, but in actuality, whether our actions and intentions are in accord with the Dharma really actually when it comes down to it, depends upon our motivations or the way we think about things. And so what are we thinking or what do we have in our hearts is very difficult for other people to understand or infer with 100%. It's clearest to ourselves. And so whether we need to check ourselves, if we need to decide what we need to do or what we need to give up, then it's difficult for anyone else to do that for us, to tell us what we should do or what we shouldn't do, what is good or bad. And so for what was Mikyo Dorje like? So how was it that he entered the Mahayana and did his actions? How is it that he was a Mahayana practitioner, and how is it he acted on love and compassion? It's like he wasn't just a good talker, and it wasn't just someone who put on a good show. He didn't just speak well or look at it from that side. From the bottom of his heart, he thought of all sentient beings of all kinds solely as his kind parents. So that's how he identified them. That's what how he acted and thought. And whenever he saw any sentient being, no matter who being stricken by suffering or committing the cause for suffering to happen, which is acting unvirtuous, performing misdeeds. And so when he would see this, or when he would hear about it, what would happen to Mikado Dorje? He would have like these expressions of body, speech, and mind of being unable to bear it. He would be uncomfortable. He would be very worried, and everyone would see his expressions of this worry. Especially when he heard news of such a people being stricken by illness or bad crops and famine happened in a region. Or maybe in another region there is an armed conflict and many people had died. Or if you heard about pupils and disciples not getting along, or if masters and servants having grudges about each other, when he heard about such situations, just as if he were actually experiencing the situation, those difficulties, as if he was experiencing the suffering, he would feel miserable and worry in the same way. He'd be thinking, what can I do? What could happen? And he was always speaking like this. When he heard about monastics breaking vows, or who having those vows were getting corrupted, who had got wrong views, when he heard about these situations, you think, what can I do? What would be best? And really worry about it greatly. And in particular, in the old days in Tibet, during the time of Mikyo Dorje, in the region of Utsang, there were many different leaders or lords of the different regions. Each region had its own lord, its own minor king. And the lamas also, who had a lot of influence in a particular region, they would be rather well known. And so some of the lords and the gurus did not have good intentions and conduct. They had bad intentions and conduct. So this did occur. And when that happened, when he heard about such situations, what Mikyo Dorje would say is, these lords and gurus, what they should do is protect a lot of people. That's what the leg of the be worthy for them to do, that they should be doing is to give refuge and protection to many people. But the way that they think and they act is forget about helping and protecting other people. It's like they're acting in a way that you just don't know what lower realm they're going to fall into in their next lives. And so he would often say things such as this. And he would say many such things that showed how much he was worried. And some people would come to Mikyo Dorje. So there were a lot of lords in Tibet in that time in Tibet. So if someone was like a friend if he was close to one lord, then another would be unhappy. And so there's so many lords, so who he should. So the question is, who should we? There's so many lords at the time that you wouldn't know whom you should get close to, or who you should flatter, to say it these days, or who you should speak to. So, and so people say, "Oh, I didn't make a good connection with this lord," and so and so I've had a difficult situation that happened. People would say, or I'm being pummeled, and I don't know what's going to happen to me, or whether the king is going to happen to me. So I'm really worried about that. What will happen? So please do a divination. They would ask, or please look with your clairvoyant powers. They would say. And what Mikyo Dorje would say to such people is, Mikyo Dorje would say, you don't understand how much you have messed up your plans, your everlasting aims, your plans for the future lives. You aren't even thinking about those aims for the next lifetime. And instead, in this lifetime, and you're so worrying so much about whether you're pleasing a particular lord or not, whether you're making a good connection to that or not, is making you suffer over things you shouldn't suffer that. This is what we call the story of the hare who's worrying about the sky falling, or like in English we would say the chicken little worrying about the sky falling. I'm not sure about the story in any case. I don't know the story about the hare, but you can talk about this. There's a bird. This bird is chicken little. And when the bird landed on the ground, or with the didn't land well, the bird. There was a bird landing on the sky, and they didn't landing on the ground. They didn't land on both feet. Landed on one foot, and the other just. And so there's some smart person who said, but why is they landing with only one foot and then the second foot? And so this person who said, this really slick talking person said he didn't land with both feet because he was otherwise the ground would split beneath him. He said. So someone who is very a slick talker said that. And so if the sky is falling, and is you don't understand that your big plans are falling through, and you're worrying about a small one. It's like this is a ridiculous way of working. And so he'd often give such advice. And the reason why he had to give such advice to other people is because Mikyo Dorje was so worried about whether that other person would achieve the everlasting happiness. Whether they would be able to be free from suffering. Sometimes people would come to Mikyo Dorje and they say someone has died, my relative, my father's, a friend, or someone they've passed away. So what should I do on their behalf? What virtuous act should I do on their behalf? So many people would ask this, and Mikyo Dorje would say, if you have so much love and compassion for the deceased person, aren't all sentient beings his parents? Haven't they all been your parents? So shouldn't you be loving to them? And what this is showing is that he was always remembering that all sentient beings had been his parents, and that's a sign of this. So it was always just coming out with his actions of body, speech, and mind. And also, And he had the pure intention of cherishing others. For him, this was not like it was for us. It was something for us. It's something we have to intentionally try to produce. But for him, it just rose automatically within his mind. And you could just tell this even when you met his followers and entourage. Likewise, he never discriminated between who was helpful and harmful, who was a friend, who was a friend. He wouldn't think this person helped me, so I need to help them. That person did something bad, so I'm not going to do good for them. He didn't have any discrimination between who was helpful and who was harmful. It seems like actually all sentient beings, and from beginning of time, we've known them. It's like we've been really familiar with them for a long time. So he started to consider all sentient beings were on his own side and within his own group. They were all considered among his friends. He didn't have any bias of thinking of anyone as being an enemy. Likewise, whether it's like a lord or whether a guru or an ordinary person, he didn't have the thought of that maybe one should win and the other should lose. He had no thought about winning and losing. He wanted everyone to do well. He wanted everyone to be happy. That's how he always thought. And continually, people would come to see Mikyo Dorje and speak with him. And he would always, if you said things that showed that you were without attachment or aversion, then he liked that. If you spoke about biased or attached or angry speak, he didn't enjoy this. But he wouldn't immediately just tell people, don't speak like that, like that. He wouldn't say anything to people, but he wouldn't. At that time, he would just say, oh, okay, but inside he wasn't happy. Likewise, with those around her, he didn't have the idea that he was close to some and not close to others. No matter what service they would give them, no matter what work they did for them, no matter what they did for them, so whatever they did was okay. He was happy with it. So it's easy for people to serve him. Some people are difficult to serve. They're very strict. And so if just doesn't work out. If you give if you serve them tea, the tea is hot, they criticize you. If the tea is too cold, then they don't like. This happens, right? But Mikyo Dorje wasn't like that. No matter what it was fine. So it was very easy to serve. The attendants or the workers of the encampment. Sometimes they would do the jobs that they were given, and sometimes they would not. Sometimes they're able and sometimes not. But he wouldn't criticize them then. He wouldn't censure them and say, you didn't finish that job, that wasn't good, and that he wouldn't speak like that. And sometimes people make mistakes during work. And then people make a mistake in the work, or they do something that's not quite right. He wouldn't immediately. He wouldn't actually do. He wouldn't speak to them and embarrass them in front of others. Instead, he would speak about them lovingly, whether they were good at their jobs or not. He would always treat them well. Generally, the people who had served Mikyo Dorje for a very long time, just naturally, because of the influence of Mikyo Dorje, had very little attachment and aversion, had a lot of very altruistic, and no matter what they did, whether it was worldly or dharma, they were very good at getting things done. And whatever Mikyo Dorje said, that they're very diligent about completing the job, and that is because Mikyo Dorje was a good person, was a fine person, and that influenced all of the people in his entourage, and so that's how they turned out like that. Now, the reason for this, primarily, is when Mikyo Dorje first received the Bodhisattva vows, he first received them from Sangye Nyempa Demadrupto. When he received these vows from Sangye Nyempa Rinpoche, what Nyempa Rinpoche said to him is, I have the feeling that from in time of lives in the past until now, your bodhicitta has not weakened. I see signs that it's like this. So basically, it's saying in the past lives, the bodhicitta hasn't declined over from until this lifetime, and so he said that he had this feeling, and so in this way, Mikyo Dorje himself he had these really strong imprints, deep imprints of bodhicitta and compassion from previous lifetimes. Sakya Rinpoche wasn't someone who flattered people. He was a Mahasiddha. He was a yogi. He'd say whatever is. He'd talk about it is. Mikyo Dorje said it. He said that he was really very that he was very direct in his speech. And because of very direct and very forceful in his speech, he would just immediately say something we needed to do. He didn't think Mikyo Dorje is the Karmapa and then kind of hold himself back and convince him. He'd immediately say what he thought. You give an example of this. Sangye Nyempa Drupta Rinpoche, just before he was going to pass away, one day he said, "It's probably better if I die, better if I pass away. Before you tulkas turn me into prostitute, it's better that I die," he said. And so what he was thinking, he just immediately said whatever he thought, as soon as he said it. And so if we look at the way Sangye Nyempa Rinpoche spoke, Mikyo Dorje himself had very deep imprints of bodhicitta and compassion from previous lifetimes. And usually Mikyo Dorje, when Mikyo Dorje himself was giving the vows of either the foundation vehicle or Mahayana, whether he was studying, whether he was teaching Dharma, or whether he was writing texts, when he was giving Dharma instructions, when he was giving reading transmissions, or when he was generally making Dharma connections with other people through the Mani mantra or other Buddha's mantras, he would always have find a pure intention and a wish to do it. And he would always prepare himself very, very well. And then only then would he actually begin. So basically in his mind, what he thought, he said that they're all sentient beings, of course. And then particularly there's the person who is placing their hope, they're the people placing hopes in him. And he would think about them. And in particular, at that time, the teachings of the Buddha were in a severe decline. And he's thinking, what can I do to help them? And how much could he, Mikyo Dorje himself, do on their behalf? And that's what he intended to do. He didn't have any selfish thoughts or any intentions at all. When Mikyo Dorje was very little, what he would say is, so from the very time he was very young, so I've been given the title of Karmapa. So now I've got this title of Karmapa. I don't have any hope because of having this title that I'm going to be a great person, a great Lama, an influential person in this lifetime. But I've become I've got a great Lama, whether I accept it or not. I've been put in that position. I've become one, and because of that, there are innumerable people who have placed great hopes in me, who depend upon me. And so to benefit those people and to tame their mind streams, merely teaching them a short text or two doesn't benefit. Giving them a short instruction or two doesn't give them due. Or just doing a few months of meditation retreat doesn't really benefit anything. So what I need to do The sentient beings are infinite, so their afflictions are also are infinite. And because their afflictions are infinite, there are also infinite methods to teach them. So I also. So I need to train myself by listening, contemplating, meditating infinite scriptures and do whatever I can to benefit them. And so he said this from the time he was very young. And just as he said, whenever he was taking an empowerment transmission teaching, he was never distracted. Sometimes it's never he had to take a lot of empowerments and transmissions, but he never got distracted. He always. So he followed the gurus, and he followed the main four great teachers, and there are many teachers. But even after he finished them, he took responsibility himself to read texts, and went through many incredible hardships to listen, contemplate, and meditate upon on the Dharma. And so no matter where he was, whether it was in a place where there were many people or within an isolated place, he always spent all his time practicing, listening, contemplating, and studying scriptures and meditating on scriptures. And when he got a little bit of an understanding of the text, he was just delighted. It's like if someone's just like rummaging through some garbage, found a jewel, they'd think, wow, this is great. And they'd be really happy about it. It's like there's some like inconceivable thing had happened to them. And it's the same with Mikyo Dorten, who had a little bit of understanding. He was just absolutely delighted. But sometimes when he hadn't quite understood, if there's something he didn't know, he would say, I'm really just deprived of Dharma. I just don't know Dharma at all. I've got really deep, thick obscurations. And it would like to disturb his health. He wouldn't be able to sleep at night and he'd suffer so much from it. He just couldn't sleep. He would even cry, even shed tears. Think I'm such a wicked and obscured person to not be able to understand these scriptures. And he'd worry about it and make himself miserable over it. But it had been brief because of his power of his training in previous lives, because of the blessing of the gurus and the three jewels. He was able to understand the textual meaning of the scriptures as it was, even if he weren't actually taught it by a teacher or a spiritual friend, through the power of his own previous training. When you read the liberation stories of Mikyo Dorje, then some people would criticize him because he spent so much time. Then what they'd say is, this doesn't really... is reading all these texts that doesn't benefit people, or taking notes about issues and editing carefully. What point is there to doing it, they'd say. And in order to do this, we're staying in Uzang, where there really isn't anyone to make offerings. And we're just really sticking it out here. In order to be able to read the texts and make notes, we're staying in Uzang, no one's making offerings. There's not a lot going on, and so what good does it do to tough it out and stay in these places? Instead, wouldn't it be better to go to a place like Kham, or there's a lot of where food and drink would like shower down them like rain, and we'd have tens and thousands of followers? Wouldn't that be good? He could have tens of thousands of followers, and he could really establish the teachings of teaching and practice. Couldn't he do that? The way His Holiness does it, it's like it's just like a child's game. It's just so ridiculous, pointless. And so there were people who criticized him, who denigrated him like this, and who had wrong views about him. In particular, many of the students and people in his entourage who liked material things, for whom they didn't enjoy staying in Uzang, who just weren't happy staying with the Kambaba, they would go off to their own homelands and really busy themselves incredibly with worldly concerns, with going food and misdeeds. They'd maybe say, I'll go in a few days and a couple of days, but instead they wouldn't stay with His Holiness and just leave. And so, like, what point is this? what point is it to stay there? They'd say there's no one who has any faith and no one is making offerings. And so it's better to just go back to their own homelands and say, leave. But Mikhail Dorje didn't really say anything bad about them. He would actually give them as many gifts as he could and send them off. He would say give them everything that they need and send them off. And actually, from one perspective, look, that's really, really depressing sentence. It's like the student is giving up the guru and running off, right? That's a really depressing situation, right? But now if we think about it now, Mikhail Dorje himself, the way he studied texts, and it's because the kindness of him studying and learning the scriptures, we in general the Taba Kaju and in particular Karma Kaju, it's like he gave us the scriptures that allow us to open the eye of prajna so that we can see the meaning of the great texts. And this is all Mikhail Dorje's kindness. So if he hadn't really toughed it out like that, if we'd gone to a place where there are places where lots of offerings and a lot of people, then he always worried about that, then we wouldn't have anything now. And so if we look at Mikhail Dorje's times, he really went through a hard time before. But it's something that we should really praise and we should really rejoice in now. In the past, Gyaltsur Mishra said to me, and I think it's true what he said. Mikhail Dorje is very good that he was it. It's very good that Mikhail Dorje is like that. It's good. And these days, people would know one to think anything of him. These days, if Mikhail Dorje should come, we would say the same thing. Right? There's no point in doing this. We'd say, this is not okay. You need to do this. You should do that. He's not doing that. We'd say I have a lot of things to say. Because our thoughts just like fall like rain. Actually, at that time, the people who didn't stay with His Holiness and left, it's a sign that they really hadn't developed faith from their hearts in His Holiness. But actually, and because if Mikhail Dorje thought he should go to Kham and have plentiful of flowers and rain, he could have done this. He could have done this in Uzang. Because if he had just dedicated a single day's virtuous acts of the three gates to the benefit of others, if he had made such a dedication, even if he had gone to an unpopulated areas in the north, he could gather food, wealth, and flowers and students. They would have showered down on him like rain. But he said he could have done this, but he didn't have any desire. He didn't enjoy doing that. It's not that he was unable to gather students in Uzang, or that he couldn't get any food and offerings. It's that he didn't enjoy it. If he had tried, he could have done it, of course. At that time, there are many people who had a lot of faith in the Karmapa. And he was very powerful, both politically and in terms of the Dharma. So he could have done it, but he didn't want to, and that's why it didn't happen. Actually, what people at that time really wanted, what their hope or their expectation, their hope was, in their opinion, is what is necessary, is that what they think of someone who has a best at thinking, who has a blank plans, so you should go to a place where you don't have to, someplace where you don't have to, not underneath anyone, where you don't need to bow down to anyone. So where there's no one to compare. If you're in Uzang, and at that time in Uzang, there was a king, right? And so you had to kind of accommodate the king. If you'd gone off to Kham, there was no particular king, right? It wasn't like in Utsang where there was an overall king who ruled over the whole earth. So you could go to Kham, you could do what you want. So if you go to a place where you don't have to bow down to anyone, and then you could give any command that you wanted to others, and do whatever you thought. And if someone else should kind of say something behind their back, you catch them and execute them and say, you can't do that. You've spoken badly about me. You've done something behind my back. And even punish them by executing them. And then after executing them, so that punished, I wasn't involved in that. I wasn't involved. My attendants and my steward had it done, but I wasn't involved at all. And so pretend to be a big lama and to be a good practitioner and actually telling a huge lie. Instead of upholding the teachings by teaching and practice, he'd try to uphold the teachings of force and by power. That's what most people understood as someone who upholding the teachings to mean. And so many people thought that was meant to be someone who was actually think well and make good plans. So this is what people around Mikyo Dorje thought. But if he had done that, if you think about it from the perspective of someone who practiced the Dharma practice, it's just absolutely nauseating work. It's just because it's totally contradictory of the Dharma. So he had no intention of doing that. So he stayed very meekly and modestly, accommodating other people. Instead of doing things to get power and some freedom for himself and taking control over the people, he didn't do that at all. So in brief, Mikyo Dorje himself, no matter what task or action he did it without any ties of selfishness or the 8 concerns. Instead, he had the pure intentions and actions to benefit the teachings and beings alone. That is how he intended alone. And because that's how he thought, sometimes he would say, kind of impressive, something he wouldn't say much. He would say, there's no one worse than me, there's no one poorer than me, there's no one who's more wicked or more obscure than I. But occasionally, he would say some more impressive things. And so sometimes what he'd say, it's just as Lord Gotsampa said, I'm going to read the words. Just as Lord Gotsampa said, I've undergone all the hardship. So if it's nice for all of you who place hopes in me, supplicate me, follow my example, and I will not deceive you, he said, giving them the great relief of fearlessness. So what he's saying here is, Mikyo Dorje himself would sometimes say, he didn't say it all the time, but just occasionally. It's like Gyal Gotsampa once said, he said, all of you students, it's great for you, because I've already underdone all the hardships. And so now I'm just giving, and so I just give you the instructions, you'll be liberated. So it's nice for you all. I've done all the hardships that need to be done. So all of you place your hopes in me, it's easy for you. So your job is now to supplicate me without any doubt and with belief. And follow my example exactly as I did. If you are able to do that, then I will not deceive you. I won't fool you. I will not fool you for either this life or the future lives. And so to give them the great relief of fearlessness, basically make people feel think, oh, that's great. It's like the relief, oh, that's enough. He wouldn't do this all the time, though, just occasionally. Generally, Mikyo Dorje would speak like he was a Buddha, or the emanation of Buddha Bodhisattva. Sometimes he'd speak as if he was an ordinary sentient person worse than a dog or a pig. So people have different ways of thinking about it, but Mikyo Dorje ordinarily would never say, oh, I'm a bodhisattva or a Buddha or a bodhisattva. He would only occasionally say that to receptive students. And this is really the tradition of many of the great lamas of the past. For example, I spoke about the life story of Rolpa Dorje, of Deshin Shekpa. There's the Minyak Jamyan Dakpa, who was a student of Karmapa Deshin Shekpa. And there's his own autobiography. And in his autobiography, it says that when he went to go see Deshin Shekpa, and he wrote about whatever conversations he had with Deshin Shekpa. And when I spoke about when I was speaking about Deshin Shekpa the other day, I didn't see that. And then after I had said everything about Deshin Shekpa, then I got a chance to actually read that life story. And I said this thing like, oh, it's terrible. I didn't have a chance to say that. There are a couple of points there like that. And one of them, what he says is, Minyan Jamyan Drapacha, when he's having conversation with Karmapa Deshin Shekpa, when they were speaking about whether Mikha Dorjde was a Buddha or Bodhisattva, where they had clairvoyance, and they were speaking as teacher and student at that time. Sometimes the servant would come to give him tree, and then when the tea came, the attendant came to serve tea, then they'd immediately stop speaking about it. The tea would serve the tea, and then they'd go, and then when the servant left, then he would again resume speaking about it, because like a secret life story. Because it's something that people just can't understand. It doesn't, and people can't get their minds around it. Because of that, they lose their faith, and if they lose faith, then they accumulate misdeeds. And then if they accumulate misdeeds, there's the danger they will fall into the lower realms. And so these are secret life stories. They don't really are something that they don't really tell to ordinary people. But sometimes they say just a little bit. If they say a little bit, it's okay. But if you say too much, we don't believe it, right? Because people are strange. So I don't know. If you say I don't know to a lot of people, and they say, oh yeah, he probably doesn't know. And sometimes you say, I know a little bit, and people say, oh yeah. We've got someone to pay help. We can place our hopes in. So people are really complicated. If you say no, they say it's pride. If you say you don't know, they say he doesn't know anything, and they get discouraged. It's really difficult, right? And so that's that. So first we'll take a break here. And then after we come together, we'll speak a little bit more about animals and meat.
Lord, give